The world of incarceration is supposed to be about control, rules, and punishment. But in some places, that idea completely collapses. What happens when the people locked inside the cells end up calling all the shots? This video exposes 10 notorious prisons where inmates didn't just survive the system, they hijacked it, flipped the power structure upside down, and ran the entire operation like their own personal empire. La Mesa Prison in Tijuana, Mexico is a perfect example of pure chaos spiraling out of control. Originally built to hold around 2,000 inmates, the population exploded past 8,000, creating a pressure cooker that guards simply couldn't manage. Outnumbered, overwhelmed, and outgunned, officers slowly lost authority as inmates stepped in and imposed their own brutal rules. Violence wasn't random, it was organized, and corruption ran so deep it became part of daily life. Gangs carved the prison into territories, enforced a savage hierarchy, and ruled with fear. Guards, intimidated and terrified, often looked the other way, quietly surrendering control. Inside those walls, inmates ran illegal businesses, controlled contraband flow, and delivered punishment on their own terms. No courts needed. Then there's Juarez Prison in Mexico, where cartel influence turned incarceration into a war zone. Rival groups clashed non-stop, transforming the prison into an extension of the streets outside. Weapons, drugs, and luxury items flooded in as guards either cooperated or stayed silent out of fear. Inmates built makeshift homes, opened shops, and lived with shocking freedom. Life inside wasn't guided by law, but by the moods and commands of powerful gang leaders. From behind bars, inmates continued organizing crimes on the outside, blurring the line between prisoner and kingpin, and this chaos didn't stop there. Tacumba, prison in Paraguay, became infamous for overcrowding and inhumane conditions, designed for 1,500, but packed far beyond capacity, setting the stage for complete inmate dominance. It housed more than 3,000 inmates, but the guards were dangerously few and badly equipped, leaving them powerless from the start. Control slipped away fast as prisoners stepped in and built their own twisted system. Inside, a brutal social hierarchy took shape, where money and influence decided everything. Those with cash lived in relative comfort, while the poor and powerless were pushed into filthy, overcrowded corners with no protection at all. In this lawless environment, violence wasn't rare, it was routine. Gangs enforced order through pure fear. Beatings and killings weren't chaos. They were punishments meant to send a message. Guards, terrified and outmatched, barely intervened, trapped inside the same walls and forced to survive by staying silent. Mendoza Prison in Argentina became another nightmare example of inmates completely seizing control. Severe overcrowding and a total lack of resources pushed the facility past its breaking point. Guards couldn't manage the swelling population, and authority collapsed almost overnight. Prisoners created their own governing system, forming councils, assigning cells, and even organizing daily operations. An underground economy exploded inside Mendoza. Smuggled drugs, electronics, and contraband flowed freely, turning the prison into a marketplace behind bars. But power never stays stable in places like this. Rival factions clashed violently with deadly consequences that made Mendoza one of the most feared prisons in the region. Guards, hopelessly outnumbered, stood by as passive spectators in a world they no longer controlled. On Isla Margarita in Venezuela, prison became a breeding ground for total anarchy. Prisoners outnumbered guards by an overwhelming margin, flipping the balance of power instantly. Gangs carved up territory, set their own rules, and forced guards into negotiations just to keep basic order. Weapons, luxury goods, and contraband poured in as the inmate-run economy thrived. Violence became part of daily life, and survival depended on strength, alliances, and reputation. Then there's Toll Prison in Colombia, where inmate control reached terrifying levels in a country shaped by cartel power. From the start, the most dangerous prisoners seized authority, turning the facility into their personal stronghold. Guards, fearing for their own lives, quietly stepped back and let the inmates run everything. Inside, cartel leaders treated the prison like a command center, continuing their criminal operations without fear or consequences. Prison life followed inmate-made rules, enforced through a ruthless hierarchy where violence was the final word. The facility turned into a fortress of organized crime. with guards reduced to little more than gatekeepers standing at the edge of a hidden underworld. In the Philippines, Davao Prison and Penal Farm became a striking example of inmate control wrapped in structure. This massive facility transformed into a self-sustaining society under prisoner governance. Inmates farmed crops, raised livestock, and operated small businesses, creating an economy that functioned almost independently from the outside world. Guards, vastly outnumbered, took a hands-off approach, allowing prisoners to manage daily life themselves. On the surface, this system appeared orderly, even productive. But beneath it, power imbalances thrived. Influential inmates exploited the weak, and violence and extortion remained constant threats. Guards often ignored abuses to keep the fragile peace intact, allowing brutality to hide behind the prison's image of self-sufficiency. Brazil's APAC prisons offer a different but equally complex picture of inmate control. These facilities operate with minimal guard presence and place responsibility directly in the hands of prisoners. Inmates enforce rules, manage routines, and maintain order through mutual accountability, all under a rehabilitation-focused philosophy. Yet even here, autonomy comes with risk. Power struggles and conflicts still emerge, exposing how fragile and matron systems can be when authority shifts unevenly. Then there's San Pedro Prison in La Paz, Bolivia, one of the most notorious examples of inmate dominance anywhere. This prison functions like a city behind walls. Inmates buy or rent cells, run shops, restaurants, and services, and some even live inside with their families, blurring the line between incarceration and freedom. Inside these prison walls, guards may patrol the outer perimeter, but once you step inside, inmates are left completely to their own devices. This strange setup creates a disturbing mix of freedom and confinement. Some prisoners manage to thrive, building status and wealth, while others are crushed by violent power struggles that explode without warning. Survival depends on alliances, money, and fear. The prison economy, driven by smuggling and corruption, exposes just how deep inmate control really runs. Everything has a price: protection, food, comfort, even safety. Those without resources are left vulnerable in a system where the strongest dictate reality. At the top of this list sits Paven Prison in Guatemala, one of the most shocking examples of inmate rule ever recorded. After a deadly riot in 1996, control completely slipped away from the state. Prisoners took over and turned Paven into their own personal kingdom. Inside, inmates ran businesses, hosted illegal operations, and even held their own court sessions to settle disputes. The prison was split into territories ruled by powerful gangs, each enforcing their authority through intimidation and violence. Guards unable to reclaim control stood by helplessly as corruption spread and brutality became routine. Pavan became a symbol of total institutional failure, a place where prisoners wielded absolute power and the law simply stopped at the gates. These 10 prisons prove how quickly control can collapse into chaos. When authority disappears, inmates create their own societies, ruled by fear, greed, and raw power. Behind concrete walls and locked gates, the darkest sides of human behavior rise to the surface, showing what happens when order dies and survival becomes the only law left standing.